This is for topic area 5, factors to consider when starting up and running an enterprise. This is 5.1, appropriate forms of ownership. So there are different types of ownership that you can choose when you start a business, and this could be for a private or a public company. The options that you need to know are sole trader, franchise, and partnership. You also need to be aware of what liability means and the impact that that can have on a business. So liability is being legally responsible for any debts or financial commitments of a business. So basically, this is deciding who's responsible for paying off the debt if something goes wrong. Unlimited liability means that the owner of the business is responsible for all of the debts. That means that they could end up having to sell their own assets to pay off any debt that is incurred. This could mean house, car, any personal possessions might need to be sold to pay off the debt. Limited liability means that that debt is limited to a certain amount. So the owners can only really lose what they've invested into the business. Therefore, there's less risk involved with this type of strategy. So the first business type we're going to look at is sole trader. Now this is essentially a self-employed person that runs the business by themselves. Now for legal requirements for this, the only thing that you really need to do is tell HMRC about your business so that you can pay your taxes. That's the only real legal documentation that you need to produce. Examples of sole traders would include a hairdresser, plumber, personal trainer, the owners of some shops if it's just you running the shop. So the main benefits for being a sole trader are that the business is owned by just you, so you can't really have a disagreement or argument with anybody else. You are in full control. Another benefit is that there are minimal startup costs. You might want to pay someone to maybe set up a website or a logo, things like that. But there are very, very minimal startup costs to become your own business. Obviously this varies depending on what you do. So if you're a plumber or electrician, things like that, you might need to buy tools and things. But in general, they are going to be quite low. It's also quite easy to start up because you're doing it all by yourself. You don't need to worry about hiring staff or anything like that. It is just basically getting yourself organised. So the drawbacks, you have unlimited liability. So that means if anything goes wrong and you end up with a lot of debt, you are the one that's liable. So you could end up potentially having to sell your house, personal possessions to pay off the debt. The main other ones are that you don't get sick pay. So if you are ever ill, you're going to lose quite a lot of money. And also, if you do want to take a holiday, like for example 2 weeks off in the summer, you will not get paid for those 2 weeks. Next business we're going to look at is a partnership. Now partnerships can technically be limited or unlimited, we'll look at that in a minute, but they allow 2 or more people to run a business together. The legal documentation that you would need for this is to register with the HMRC again, but it's also a very good idea to create a deed which outlines how the business is owned and run. For example, if 2 people go into business together as a partnership, they will need a written legal contract basically outlining who owns what percentage of that business. If it's 50-50 for example, or it could be 75-25% ownership, that all needs to be documented. Now during this process of the legal documentation, you can decide whether it's going to be a limited or unlimited liability partnership. If you bring in certain partners, for example, you might ask them to pay an investment, and the only part that they are liable for is that investment. So if the business was to go under, then they would just be liable for their input, their shares that they hold. Now, in general, partnerships are usually deemed to be unlimited liability, meaning that if the partnership fails, if the business fails, the partners will all have to be responsible for paying that debt. So examples of a partnership would be things like a dentist, where you might have 3 dentists working in one particular building, and they might all own an equal share of that business. The same with accountants. Solicitors often have multiple names attached to their business, and estate agents as well. So the benefits of a partnership: it's still fairly easy to set up, although it is advised that you do all that legal documentation. Your decisions can be shared amongst more than one person, so you don't have to decide everything yourself. You can use different people's strengths to try and help you organise that business. And also, you can get funding from your partners. So if each partner that joins the business pays a certain amount into the company, then that can help you to fund the business. Drawbacks: if it's an unlimited liability, then again, you can be responsible for all of the debts, but it might make it also more difficult to get any sort of loans because the banks will expect you to fund it from your partners. It's also difficult to leave because you have that written documentation. So if you did want to leave the partnership, it might be difficult to get your assets back. And if you do want to hire a new partner, you'd have to get everybody to agree to that partner joining the company. There are obviously legal costs, quite a lot of legal costs every time you want to hire someone new or if someone wants to leave, and also to outline all of those contracts at the beginning. Another drawback is that you can get disagreements between partners as well, so any sort of arguments within the business could create friction. Finally, we're going to look at franchise. Franchise is a really interesting one because it gives you the opportunity to join something really big. So it's where one business allows another one to buy the right to trade under their name. So the best example would be something like Burger King, where you have the potential to buy into their company and start up your own branch wherever you see fit. Now, this is the case with many different companies out there, where they allow you to use their name, their corporate image, their logo, their kind of idea for the business, but you need to pay them for the rights to do that. So the legal documentation that's required is that you need to have a proper written contract with solicitors where you will sign it, both parties need to agree, and you then get access to all of those benefits that come with being a franchise. So the main benefits are that it's a lot easier to get money. If you need some money from the bank, you could say, I wanted to join this franchise, and they are more likely to give you the money because they know it will be successful. You get a lot of support from that business. You get training and all of the marketing tools given to you. You have a high chance of success because it's an established business that's done well. And because it's already well known and established, you will find it a lot easier to get customers in. Now, the drawbacks of a franchise is that you cannot sell your branch without getting agreement from the franchise itself. So, in other words, if you have enough and you want to move on, you can't do that. You can't sell to anyone without their permission. Major drawbacks: you've got to pay royalties. So you would have to pay a percentage of what you are earning back to the company, usually around 10%. You have to follow all the company guidelines. So if there's something you don't necessarily agree with, it's tough. You just have to follow what their standard routines are. And finally, you don't have full control. So that could become frustrating for some people.
Private limited company is new to this specification. The ownership of a private limited company is divided into equal parts called shares. Whoever owns one or more of these is called a shareholder. Rather than owning the whole company, they are called investors. A private limited company is private when its shares are not available to the public by being bought and sold on the stock exchange. Obviously, if you can buy shares on the stock exchange, it is a public limited company. Examples of private limited companies are Facebook, IKEA, and lots of different banks. Private limited companies have got limited liability. That means an investor only loses their initial stake if the company goes bust. The benefits of a private limited company are that the owners can retain full control. They are more able to raise money by seeking investors, and they have limited liability. Drawbacks are you've got to be registered with the registrar of companies, so it's not just as easy as saying I am a PLC. You have high setup costs, legal and administrative, and they are much harder to motivate and control your workers when all of the money is going to the shareholders. That's the end of this video. If you've got any questions, send me an email and I'll get back to you.